we had, before the war, all my friends were about 15 of us. I think there were 10 boys and 5 girls. And we used to all go out hiking, or we go out on our bikes. And one of my friends was the nephew of Ralph Reeder, who used to put on the scout shows. I forget what they're called now. But Ralph Reeder wrote a song about me.
Oh, really? What's that all about? Do you mean the Scout Club? Is that what you're talking about?
No, well, it was what do they call it? There was a word for the scouts put on a show.
Okay. And he wrote a song about it. What was it about?
Oh, it was, the words were, a girl in a million is Rosie, a girl in a million is she, always so cuddly and cosy, just as a girl should be.
Oh my gosh.
When I see her, I give her a posy in a corner where no one can see.
What's a posy? Is it a kiss or something?
So we used to put on these little shows and raise money for charity and things.
Cool. That's a pretty nice song, eh?
We had great times. And then, of course, the war came, so all the guys got called up. But I had a happy time, you know.
Yeah.
And I was quite safe, I think, because there were too many people around for me to get into trouble.
Yeah, okay.
But I did have, my boyfriend was called Arthur, and not your grandfather, another Arthur.
Yeah.
And he and Arthur Ive, his name was, and Arthur Munsey and Phil Pryor, they were great friends, and they all worked at the beginning of the war at the Central Telegraph Office.
Okay.
And so I used to go out with them, meet them in town, and we sort of lived on, we had a great time.
Just hanging out.
And then my boyfriend was the first to get called up, and he said to the other two, look after her while I'm away. Well, the other Arthur looked after me too well. He used to ring me every day and take me out, and I'm afraid I broke up with the first one. So we were 21 when we got married.
Yeah.
And we got married in the May. He went in the army. Oh, first of all, he went in the Air Force. And he was training to be a pilot. And he passed all the exams. And he started flying. But he suffered badly with air sickness. And so they sort of chucked him out. And,
Okay.
and he had almost a breakdown, because he was so upset. He so much wanted to be a pilot.
Yeah, okay. And he ended up becoming
So then he went in the army.
Okay.
And because he was a telegraphist, he went in the signals. He was already trained.
Yeah, okay.
So after a couple of months or so, he was sent off to North Africa.
Okay.
But before he went, we got married.
Cool.
And then he used to write to me every single day.
Cool.
And I used to write to him every night.
What was your marriage like? Was it a hurried one, or?
Oh, well, we got engaged the year before he went in the army.
Okay.
And then on one of his first leaves, we got married.
Okay, cool.
And we had a week honeymoon, and then he was off.
Cool. And whereabouts did you get married, in London, or?
Yes, in Mitcham, yeah.
Cool. And
Yes. So I was at home at my parents' place, and the beady eyes were on me so that I didn't misbehave.
yeah.
But the other fellas used to come home and leave and take me out, so that was good.
Sure.
But I didn't like telling him that because he'd be a bit upset.
Might get jealous. So it was quite common back then for people to go out, like for another guy to take you out just casually.
Yeah.
It's okay. Yeah. I think nowadays it would be quite unusual, maybe.
Do you think so?
I think so, yeah. But I guess that's just how it's changed, eh?
I remember giving one of them a photograph of me,
Okay.
and he said to me, "You should never do that. He'll go back." He was in the Air Force, this fella. "He'll go back to the mess and say he slept with you." And I didn't think he'd ever do something like that.
Yeah. Who knows? That's funny. So when the war started, how old were you?
17.
17. Okay. And that's when you got married, is it?
No, we got married when I was 21.
Oh, okay. Oh, so
So he got called up when he was 18.
Okay.
And and he was working at the Central Telegraph Office and doing sort of, I think they did 8 hours on and 24 hours off or something like that.
Okay.
And he got, on the teleprinter, he got messages from Europe when the Germans were taking over, and he got some of the last messages out of Europe on the teleprinter.
Okay.
I did have one from Belgium, but I don't know what I've done with that.
Oh, like he kept it for his own records kind of thing. Oh, that's cool. So when you were 17 the war started, but you didn't get married until you were 21?
No.
Was that his first, so he didn't get sent away as soon as the war started?
No, when he wasn't old enough. No.
Okay.
So he was 17.
Okay.
And then after he was 18, he had to wait to get into the Air Force.
Okay.
And then he went in and he came out of the Air Force at the beginning of 1942.
Okay.
And
So
he
he's
went
sort of
back
in
to
training.
work at the post office. And during that time, the Duke of Kent was killed in an air crash.
Okay.
And he was sent to Buckingham Palace to manage the post office there.
Okay.
Because they got all the messages about the Duke's death.
Yeah, okay. And then after that he got sent out, is it?
And then he was called up in the army.
So there were sort of a few years between the start of the war and getting called out because he was training for Air Force and. Okay, cool. What about just before the war? I guess you were still at high school and stuff like that, grammar school, right?
Well, he left when he was 16.
Okay.
And then he got trained as a telegraphist and
Okay.
counter clerk.
Cool. And what about where did he get sent during the war?
He went to North Africa first.
Yeah.
And then over to Italy. And he was in Italy when the war finished.
Okay, cool.
He was in Naples, and he was in Rome when the war finished, at Caserta Palace, manning that, like in the signals department.
Okay, cool.
He said he was in more danger on the day the war was declared over than he'd been all the time, because the Americans were going around firing off their guns everywhere.
Celebrating. Oh, that's funny.
And then he was too young to be demobbed. So in October, I think it was, September, October 1945, he came home for a month's leave.
Okay.
And then they sent him back to Egypt.
Okay, so but there was no fighting or anything?
No, but he got attacked in Egypt by the Arabs. Got his his wrist broken.
In a fight?
And we didn't hear from him, and we didn't know what had happened to him. And I was expecting my first baby. And the baby died and we couldn't get in touch with him. So
Oh, really? That must have been pretty rough, eh?
it was. But his father, your grandfather, great-grandfather, got in touch with the Soldiers and Sailors Association, and they got him home on compassionate leave. So then he spent a few more months in the army in England,
Okay.
and he was demobbed.
So, compassionate leave because you're a child?
And then I was very sick afterwards. so-
Okay, cool. And how did he break his wrist or his
Well,
hand?
he was attacked by the Arabs.
Like in a bar fight or in a
Well,
in a
he
shoot?
was in a taxi or something, and they took him off into the desert and beat him up.
Oh, really? Wow.
He said they used to try and steal all their guns, you know. They get in under the tent and steal their guns. Because there was a lot of sort of bad feeling then.
Yeah, okay. And what about for you during the war back in London? What were you doing during that time?
Oh, I was working 60 hours a week.
What were you doing?
Well, I was working for the government as a reserved occupation. So I was in the post office savings bank. We looked after all the money, you know. But we had, when the war first started, well, when the bombing first started, we used to have to go down to the shelters. But it was